So I want to talk a bit about some kind of practical tips, practical things you can do to think about living abroad. And as I do that, I'll talk a bit about my own experiences preparing, the things I did that were really good, all the things I didn't do that I really wished I'd done, and looking back, I kind of kick myself about. Um, but kind of start off, I think, yeah, once you've decided that, this is your path, this is what you want to do, there are really a lot of kind of practical things you can begin to do to get ready. So I want to start by talking about kind of preparing yourself mentally. And of course, Grace went into that a lot, developing your mindset, your why. But I want to kind of focus on the idea of the sorts of experiences you might want to have before you come over here. So in my case, when I was a high school student, I became interested in Japan. We hosted a Japanese exchange student from Tokyo. I had a really good time, kind of talking with him, although he didn't really speak English very well. And at that point, I didn't have any Japanese language skills, and it kind of really sparked my interest. And then through that interest, I continued to kind of put myself into positions where I would be able to meet other people who were from other countries, not just Japan, but exchange students from around the world. And this continued through my experiences at university. In university, I was part of a group of students who created a student organization. We called it the Asian American Association Symposium, so it could be AAAS. And basically, we did support for exchange students. We organized events for them to go different places. And I'm very much glad that I did that. Now, of course, your own journey might be quite different, but the fact that I had those experiences working with people whose language was not, first language was not English, really helped me immensely when I came here. Before, when I was a high school student and I had, the Japanese exchange student visiting my house, I really didn't have any idea how to change my communication ability, my communication style to match him. And although I think he had a good experience, and I certainly had fun, hanging out with him and, going different places and doing different things, looking back, I realized that we didn't really talk about anything at all because I wasn't quite sure how to approach that communication situation. Um, but by working with exchange students when I was a university student, I really had so much time to spend and try to talk and to figure out, okay, so if you can't understand this, how can I change what I'm saying so that you can understand what I'm trying to say? And then for me as well, how can I fill in the blanks when your language is very, very basic? So what is the subtext? What are you trying to tell me? And really that I think is very useful. And so I think even Grace mentioned even if you don't have big programs working with say Japanese students, I think she mentioned France, really anywhere if you have a chance to build those experiences with people whose first language is not English, working on those communication skills. Another really kind of good point from being involved with that student club for myself was that it also meant that I did lots and lots of kind of cultural activities in my home state, which I probably wouldn't have usually done just for myself, right? Because I grew up with it. So why do I care if I go visit, that little local museum that's talking about some really random small local historical point? I wouldn't think about going to do that myself because, for me, it was just the thing I drove past every day going to work or something like that. But by having the excuse or the reason by being part of this club, I went and I learned about that kind of minor point in the history of my hometown. Which why is that important? Well, when you come to Japan, you're going to be doing self introductions all the time, and you're going to be taking lots and lots of questions from students, maybe even parents, teachers about mundane things, maybe just, where do you live, like kind of people in your family. But also, you might have a teacher who says like, oh, you're from, that small town. I went there once and I really enjoyed going to this really small museum. Have you been there? And if you haven't, it's kind of like, okay, well, conversation over, that's it. But if you have gone, you can say, yeah, I went there and, I like this and I like that. And that's a really good way then to kind of build those relationships and to have something to talk about. You may find particularly coming on the JET program, you'll probably have just graduated from university, or perhaps only been a couple of years out. And so you have kind of a bit of an age gap quite often with a lot of the teachers. And if you have, just that, experience you can talk about, that's really great. That's just one example of, ways that you can connect the experiences you have now back, in your home country with, the people who you're going to meet when you come here to Japan. That's just one small example, but really anything that you do, any hobbies, anything at all like that, if you can get out and do those things, that'll only help you when you get here. Now, I just talked a little bit about adjusting your communication style when you're talking with people whose language is not first language is not English. Now, of course, that's very important, particularly as a teacher, as you'll be in classrooms with students who are learning and have very, very limited English. But it's also, I think, before you go, very important to start learning Japanese. When I see the people who come here on the JET program or otherwise who succeed, one of the keys to their success is usually their ability to communicate in Japanese. It depends on where you go. There are some places, if you're in a big city, it might be possible to live without really using any Japanese. I have friends who live down in Tokyo who have been here for decades, longer than me, who don't speak any Japanese because down in Tokyo, it's pretty easy. Even if you go to City Hall, you'll probably find some office worker who speaks English, maybe fine. But if you're on the JET program particularly, you're likely to go somewhere more rural where there's very little language support. And so people I know who tend to stay here for 3, 4, even 5 years, generally were fairly fluent in their Japanese, at least by the end. And so I think there's certainly a good reason to start learning. So what can you do specifically to start learning? It's very nebulous just to say, well, learn Japanese before you come. So what does that mean? The first thing that I really would recommend is to learn 2 of the written alphabets, learn hiragana and learn katakana. If you create flashcards and are fairly disciplined, you should be able to learn that in a couple weeks. When I studied Japanese in university, I did an intensive course for my first year, as it were, and so we had 3 days to learn hiragana and katakana, so basically a week. It's possible. Just, do it 10 times a day for a full week, it'll be no problem. But even if you have, other things to do, still learn that. And just by having that, you'll have really a big head start. If you go to restaurants, a lot of times, if you're ordering things, there's an awful lot of katakana for, Western food. And just having that will help a lot. Once you've mastered those basic writing systems, the next step is to work on the basics. So things like greetings, saying good morning, good afternoon. You'll be in the workplace, so knowing how to say, otsukaresama desu, like when you finish work, what to say to your coworkers. Those really kind of simple greetings. And even if you can't really have a conversation, just being able to have that will really help you kind of fit in and kind of match up with what's happening in the workplace. From there, if you have the chance, definitely a lot of high schools now offer Japanese language classes. I definitely recommend taking them if you can. But even if you can't, work on those basics. Moving on from that, if you have the time, think about how you might introduce yourself, how to do a jiko shokai, self-introduction. When you come to Japan, at least it was my experience, when I first arrived at my Board of Education, I had to do my self-introduction many, many times to different people at different levels in the school, to the person in charge of the Board of Education, to my department person in charge of the department, to my boss, then to my schools, to the principals, vice principals at the schools, and then, of course, to the students. So even if, you're kind of looking at, okay, what Japanese can I learn that's, not trying to study everything, that'd be a very good place to start. And from there, you start branching out, learning grammar, start learning kanji. Don't be scared of it. A lot of people see, kanji characters. There's thousands. Oh my God. But it's not, well, it's bad, but it's not that bad. If you, take a systematic approach and try to learn them. I can't really write kanji despite having been here for 20 years, but being able to read it, being able to type it on a computer or on your smartphone is really, really going to help you a lot. And particularly if you decide to stay here longer, it will definitely help with school things, right? When you're doing lesson plans and things. It's been, 20 years basically since I came, so things may have changed, but my lesson plans were generally written entirely in Japanese with only the English keywords in English. And so being able to read, that really helped quite a lot. So that'd be kind of the practical steps for those sorts of things. I do kind of want to finally mention a couple things that you might want to think about before you come over here, which is to try to organize your life. Now, you're still in high school, so this is perhaps kind of thinking a bit far ahead. But as you're finishing high school, going into university, this will become more important as well. But to have an idea about your responsibilities, both to your home country, that means legal responsibilities, and having an idea about what legal responsibilities you'll have here. Now, I don't want you to freak out. Japan, at least, is very forgiving on those things. And so if you make a mistake, you'll have lots of support. But in my case, for example, when I came here, I didn't think I'd be staying that long. So I really didn't bring much stuff with me. But that meant that later on, when I needed a copy of my birth certificate, it was really a pain to get that sent from America. Or like my social security cards, like documents like that. If you don't bring them, that's fine. But knowing where they are, so that if you have to go back and get them, or you want your family to send them to you, that's really important. Now, of course, that's also really important as you're finishing up high school and going to university as well. But just like, those little things, you might just think, well, I'm going to be going for like a year or 2 years, and it doesn't matter. Well, I thought so too. I thought, oh, maybe 3 years, then I'll come back, and I'm still here. And so, it's really good to kind of organize those sorts of things. Again, don't stress about it too much just yet. Japan at least is very forgiving. If you don't have the stuff you need, you can kind of take the time to get it. So it's not end of the world, but just a general idea. And I think the kind of final thought I want to leave on is just this idea I like to propose of flexibility. So this means being flexible in kind of all aspects of your life, really. Again, so people who come here who tend to do well tend to be those who are very much open to new experiences. Now, Grace talked a lot about this, right? Developing that mindset of being open to new experiences. But I kind of want to double down on that and say it's really, really important. I've seen a lot of ALTs come who have not been able to really kind of wrap their head around the fact that things are different, right? They come here perhaps and they talk with our other ALTs and they all kind of come from the same country. And so they have kind of that cultural bubble. And so then when they kind of hit the Japanese cultural wall, as it were, they have a lot of trouble adapting to that because they're quite kind of stuck in their old ways. So there are, several anecdotes about that, right? Like, a guy who was here quite a long time ago, but he would go to the convenience store to pay for things. And in Japan, you don't pass money back and forth directly, right? You put the money in a small tray on the counter, the clerk takes it, puts your money back in the tray, you take the money, right? And this person, again, this is probably 25 years ago, so a bit less prep perhaps, was quite insulted, right? And he thought the clerk was racist because, maybe the clerk didn't want to touch him because he was a dirty foreigner or something. And, it's just a matter of like, no, like culture, this is polite, right? Because money's kind of dirty and you don't want to actually like, touch that. This is actually a good thing, right? And so by, going into situations and trying to take the most positive viewpoint on it, right? So don't think that people are being malicious. I think it's just a difference to go on, right? And so I think, to prepare for that, it's really useful to try to learn about Japanese culture. But that's also very, very nebulous and also quite difficult because what is, the okay or normal, let's say down in Tokyo, is very different up where I am. I'm up north in Aomori Prefecture. I had some colleagues who had gone study abroad down in Osaka, and they came here and they couldn't stand it because it was completely different culture up here versus down in Osaka. And they left after a year, went down back to Osaka. I think they're still working down there. But they didn't have the flexibility, right? So, whatever country you're from, I'm sure depending on where you're from in that country, the culture is very different. That's also true here. So as you're learning about Japanese culture, as you're, reading about it or perhaps, watching different media, understand that's just going to be a small snapshot of that specific area and won't necessarily be true for the whole country, right? So as much as you prepare, you also need to prepare yourself for things being quite different than you might expect. Up here in Aomori, people are much more blunt with what they say. We're up in the north, perhaps that's why. And so people who have studied abroad down south tend to find people up here rather abrasive, perhaps a bit rude. And the other way, I really like it up here. Everybody is quite honest about their feelings. So when I go down south, I feel kind of weird as if everybody's being kind of artificially polite. But again, it's just differences. So you got to be flexible and being prepared for those sorts of things. So that'd be basically my steps for language. Learn hiragana, learn katakana, learn basic greetings, and try to learn your self-introduction. for experiences, do as much as you can. Join student activities, do sports. If you don't do sports, know a bit about sports. Kids love baseball, they love soccer, they'll ask you questions about the teams from your home state, your home country. Be ready for that. Just have a general idea about where your important documents are so that if you need them in the future, you'll be all right. And finally, be flexible. Don't be stuck on any ideas. But of course, at the same time, make sure you're not doing things you're totally uncomfortable with. But just kind of know yourself and know what you think is as far as you can stretch and still be okay, and go for it, right? This may be a once in a lifetime opportunity and you don't want to waste it. So just, come in, be positive, good mindset, be flexible. All right. Well, that's what I wanted to tell you all. Thank you very much.